Now the issue of horse meat. Eating horses has been taboo for almost all of American history, and with good reason. But recently, Congress has considered changing U.S. law to revive the American horse slaughter industry. Here's what horse meat advocate Dave Duquette had to say about it. Watch. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker. Thanks for having me on.
So this, as you well know, strikes a lot of people, particularly in cities, as horrifying. Why is it a good idea?
It's mainly a welfare issue, Tucker. It's the welfare of horses in the horse world is it's gone downhill ever since. When you have something that doesn't have any value at all, which is what the unwanted horse is, they end up getting shipped to Canada or Mexico, and they're not worth anything.
Right. We have that problem with a lot of domesticated animals, certainly with cats and dogs, and unfortunately we euthanize a lot of them. It's really sad, but we don't eat them because it feels like it's crossing the line because we're so close to them. Why are horses different?
Horses are considered livestock in every state in the union, and they're on average a 1,000-pound animal. And as far as euthanizing them, you start euthanizing the 150,000 unwanted horses a year, and you're talking about millions of pounds of toxic waste.
Oh, so it's a question of disposing it, and who would eat it?
Well, we have quite a market, actually. In 2011, when the riders came off the appropriations bill, my name was all over it because I was advocating for it. And I was contacted by the Tongan communities. There was one meat buyer in the south in Florida that said he had 2.3 million Hispanics down there that would eat it every day if they could get it.
I guess
many ethnic groups.
Right. But, I mean, America's always been distinct in that we don't eat it, and the French do. And I mean, to be totally blunt with you, it's been for more than a century kind of a point of pride, a bragging point that, you eat horses and we don't. Doesn't this kind of put us at the level of the French if we start doing it?
That's kind of a total misnomer, or however you want to put that. Over 50% of the world's countries eats horse meat every day. If you go around Europe, the whole European Union, you'll find more traditional horse meat recipes than you will any other type of meat. From the Chinese, the Mongolians, the Japanese, all the Indonesian countries, Africa, just about every country in Africa, if they can get a hold of horse meat, they'll eat it. South America, Mexico, if you've eaten tacos on the beach in Cabo, you've eaten some horse meat. Until 1985, horse meat was available on the menu at the Harvard Faculty Club. And the only reason they quit doing it was because the new chef, the meat came to him flash frozen, and the new chef did not want to cook anything that had been frozen. That's the only reason it went off, and that was all the way to 1985. We have a huge history of horse meat consumption in the United States, and the Humane Society of the United States will try to tell you that that's not so. Well, it is so. I mean, it doesn't take very much Googling and very much looking around to find that we did consume a lot of horse meat in the United States.
I thought it was just Lewis and Clark in an emergency in a blizzard, or the Donner Party or something. I had no idea. And you're making me rethink that vacation in Cabo. That's it for tonight. Another special on Monday. Ultimate Final Exam. Play along with your favorite contestants here at Fox. Eastern Memorial Day. See you then. Have the best weekend.
Welcome to this special edition of Hannity, Trump on Offense. I'm Jeanine Pirro in for Sean tonight. After President Trump's tough talk yesterday, the summit with Kim Jong-un may be back on because North Korea is signaling a willingness to sit down with the U.S. Here's what President Trump said earlier today. Take a look.
Mr. President, is the summit still on? We're going to see what happens. We're talking to them now. It was a very nice statement they put out. It could even be the 12th. We're talking to them now. They very much want to do it. We'd like to do it. We're going to see what happens. John, everybody plays games. You know that.
President Trump also tweeted today, quote, "Very good news to receive the warm and productive statement from North Korea. We will soon see where it will lead, hopefully to long and enduring prosperity and peace. Only time and talent will tell." Secretary of Defense James Mattis is also saying the two sides may come to the table. Take a look.
Got some possibly some good news on the Korea summit, where our diplomats can pull it off, may have it back on even. Our president just sent out a note about that a few moments ago. I want to let you all know that's a usual give and take, of trying to put together big summits and stuff. So diplomats are still at work, and from our point of view here at the Defense Department, that's a fine thing.
The president also touted America's increased military might during an address to the U.S. Naval Academy. Take a look.
We have begun the great rebuilding of the United States military. We have ended the disastrous defense sequester. No money for the military. Those days are over. And we've just secured, you've read all about it, a $700 billion, largest ever amount of money to support our great warfighters.
Joining us now with reaction, our Fox News contributor, retired CIA senior intelligence Daniel Hoffman, U.S. Army veteran Brett Velikovich, and co-author of Reaper, Brigadier General Tony Tata. All right, good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to start with you, Daniel Hoffman. Are we witnessing, as we look at the last 24 hours from where did it begin with Wednesday Pyongyang saying that the U.S. is looking for an appalling tragedy to occur, and the president yesterday canceling the summit, and then if you change your mind, though, don't hesitate to call. I mean, this has been a roller coaster of activity. Is this the kind of thing that happens in all diplomatic negotiations?
Well, I think probably it's particular to North Korea, the Hermit Kingdom, which is one of the most closed countries on the planet with a bankrupt economy, and chemical and biological and nuclear weapons and an ICBM capability to go along with it. What I think is important to note is that the North Koreans played a hand. They tried to behave as if they didn't want the summit. Secretary Pompeo said they ghosted us. They rejected planning meetings, and they disparaged our vice president and the national security advisor. And the president called their bluff. And right away, the response from North Korea was conciliatory, not bellicose, and looks like the summit might be back on. I think this can only strengthen our hand as we head possibly to Singapore next month.
And, I'll go to you, Brett. I mean, how different is this than the negotiations during the Iran deal with Obama?
Well, it's a lot different. I think if we've learned anything in the last 24 hours is that the president's chess move worked. I mean, look, if this was the same administration that worked the Iran deal, we'd be begging and pleading for them to come to the negotiation table over and over again just to get them to sign some paper, that's a weak deal in the end. And so what we're seeing here is a very significant event that is playing out on the world stage. And I think the president, in the end, did the right thing here.
And General Tata, it was interesting listening to Secretary of Defense Mattis talk about, we've possibly got some good news. How involved is the military in the negotiation stage? It was kind of interesting seeing Mattis up front there.
Well, I think that's very deliberate on the president's part. The military is the teeth behind the diplomatic effort, the information effort, the economic effort that's going on here. And the president is masterfully synchronizing all of that. And so the defense secretary really has a few roles here. One is to provide the trained and ready forces and to be able to say with confidence that we can attack, we can defend, we can do whatever we need to do. And that message is very important. Secondly, of course, he advises the president on the readiness and the state of readiness. And the president is very forceful in what he's saying is that we have the most trained and ready force that we've had in a long time. $700 billion defense budget, the biggest ever. And so I think that's really two of the key pieces that the Secretary of Defense plays in these negotiations. And of course, there's operational stuff on the ground in South Korea that General Vince Brooks and his team will be doing as they help prepare and head to Singapore.
And Daniel Hoffman, in line with what General Tater was just saying, North Korea released hostages, and whether or not that the blowing up of that nuclear site renders it unusable, we're not sure, but we believe that to be the case. So even while there is this bellicose kind of back and forth, North Korea is still doing what it should be doing, and President Trump said, I ain't meeting you until you agree to denuclearize.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of the price of admission for a discussion about the summit was, first and foremost, release the hostages and then take care of those nuclear test sites. They have apparently eliminated them. But, now we'll have to wait and see whether they're really serious about coming to the table. And I think, only time will tell. But, I think we did synchronize the message very well. Secretary Pompeo was very clear that if North Korea doesn't want to negotiate, we'll revert to situation normal, which means military deterrence and maximum economic pressure.
All right, and then to you, Brett. I mean, the demilitarization. Okay, a lot of North Korean leaders have promised that. How do we verify it? I mean, even yesterday with the blowing up of that site, I mean, no one was there from our side to substantiate that.
Right, and it has to be verifiable and irreversible, and I think that's been the problem a lot of times. I mean, in 2008, you have to remember, we have to look at history here. A bunch of journalists were invited to watch the destruction of this cooling tower that was there really to extract weapons-grade plutonium. And what the audience didn't know was that the North Koreans had a separate facility that they had already built and ready to go, and so they used this explosion just for some media coverage, but in the end, they were deceiving us. And so one of the things, though, that I still haven't really seen defined here is how do both sides, the U.S. and North Korea, truly define denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula?
Right.
Because right now, it sounds like a very one-sided compromise when you think about it on behalf of the North Koreans. And I just don't know why they would give up their nuclear arsenal just for the loosening of some sanctions. So in the end, the president is going to have to convince Kim Jong-un, who really in the end really wants regime preservation and this new phase of economic modernization, he has to convince Kim Jong-un that he can still preserve his regime and give up nuclear weapons in the process.
He makes a very good point, General, and that is, it seems at this point that North Korea is doing all the, the moves right now.
Well, I think, if you look at the letter that North Korea sent back, it talks about reunification. I think this is a bigger conversation than denuclearization. When you heard what Secretary Pompeo said when he returned, he talked about having North Korea on par with South Korea, I think is the term he used. So what you've got is an opportunity. And let's remember, Kim Jong-un was educated, we believe, in Switzerland, right? So he's got a Western education, and he came to power with really two visions. When his father and grandfather came with a self-reliant nation, a powerful military, Kim Jong-un came with nuclear power and economy, a strong economy. And so he may be willing to trade off the nuclear power if we come in and with build the infrastructure. And remember, there are some families that are still divided from the demarcation line, and they're the same people, the same work ethic, and that North Korea can become an economic powerhouse, and this could be the end game for Kim Jong-un and President Trump.
Okay, and Daniel Hoffman, one of the things that I found so interesting was that Kim Jong-un, I mean, he seemed to almost have, schizophrenic personalities. One day he's off the wall, he's Rocket Man, and the next day, he wants to reunify and connect with South Korea and the games and his sisters out there. He didn't go, or his people didn't go to a meeting where they were supposed to set up the actual logistics for the meet. There are some reports that he was afraid of being knocked off. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that's certainly a challenge for our intelligence community, and the intelligence community, CIA, NSA in particular, will play a very important role in providing the intelligence to this administration and to the president on what exactly Kim Jong-un is thinking, and including some of the elites who may be influencing his behavior. That's a theory that's out there. It's certainly possible that some in his coterie were concerned that he was moving a little bit too fast, and they wanted to put the brakes on him, though I would caution everyone that Kim Jong-un is in pretty strong control. Remember, he has a habit of killing those who threaten him, including with VX in a Malaysian airport. So I think he has some pretty strong control over his country, and that may simply be a story that was let out as a feint, and it might not really be true. But again, I would highlight the value of intelligence in this case so that we step out smartly on these negotiations. And I would also emphasize, too, we're in for the long haul here. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns, and really neither side should expect any immediate gratification. We've heard just from this panel about some of the extraordinary complex challenges that await us.
And you know what, Brett, when you think about it, the president has navigated some extremely difficult waters. Doesn't this put President Trump, I mean, even given as far as he's gone, in contention for a Nobel Peace Prize?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, this is a very historic next few months for sure. I mean, no sitting president has ever met a North Korean leader, and there's no doubt that this is going to absolutely be historic. I mean, there's no doubt that this is the deal of the century. It will define the president, in his career, and he can't fail at this. And so I'm rooting for him. I know others are looking to see him fail, but this is something that's bigger than just us in America. It's a deal for the rest of the world.
Real fast, contention? Nobel Peace Prize?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is the art of the deal. I think the president, though, wants this for the world, not for the Nobel Peace Prize. He wants this for the world.
And he has said that. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And coming up, President Trump went on offense this week against the deep state actors who are trying to cripple his presidency as well as the will of the American people. We'll explain and get reaction from Greg Jarrett, Tom Fitton, and Charlie Hurt. That and more as this special edition of Hannity continues.
Live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. Movie mogul Harvey Weinstein is free on $1 million bond tonight. The disgraced producer turned himself into New York police today. He was in Manhattan criminal court for about 10 minutes. He faces a number of charges that he raped one woman and forced another to perform sex acts on him. Weinstein denies the charges. He's also wearing an electronic tracking device right now and is banned from traveling outside New York or Connecticut. Irish Yes supporters are celebrating in the streets tonight. Two major exit polls are predicting they won a landslide victory to repeal the country's constitutional ban on abortions. Results are expected by tomorrow afternoon. Voter turnout was high, slightly better than 60%. More than 3 million people were eligible to vote in this predominantly Catholic country. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Hannity for all of your headlines. Log on to foxnews.com. Have a great night.
It looks like a very serious event, but we'll find out. When they look at the documents, I think people are going to see a lot of bad things happen. I hope it's not so, because if it is, there's never been anything like it in the history of our country. This was a terrible situation. What we're doing is we're cleaning everything up. It's so important. What I'm doing is a service to this country. We now call it Spygate. You're calling it Spygate. A lot of bad things have happened.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. That was President Trump earlier this week going on offense against the deep state. And the president didn't stop there. He wrote on Twitter today, quote, "The Democrats are now alluding to the concept that having an informant placed in an opposing party's campaign is different than having a spy, as illegal as that may be. But what about an informant who is paid a fortune and who sets up way earlier than the Russian hoax?" The president then wrote, quote, "Can anyone even imagine having spies placed in a competing campaign by the people and party in absolute power for the sole purpose of political advantage and gain? And to think that the party in question, even with the expenditure of far more money, lost." The president's comments are causing people like former CIA Director John Brennan to lash out. Take a look.
What's the difference between an informant and a spy?
Well, first of all, I think there's very
typical of Mr. Trump to mischaracterize. He's a master of mischaracterization and dishonesty. But again, this is something that Mr. Trump is, as you said, masterful at in terms of twisting the truth in order to support his narrative. A lot of people are complaining that the FBI and the CIA and others didn't do enough to try to uncover what Russia was doing. Well, this is exactly what the FBI was supposed to do, and thank goodness they did it.
Joining us now with reaction is the author of the upcoming book, The Russia Hoax. Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton, and Washington Times columnist and Fox News contributor Charlie Hurt. All right, Greg, I'm going to start with you. Did the FBI have a legal basis to start a criminal investigation? Did they even have a sufficient intelligence basis to launch an intelligence probe?
They had neither, and the evidence is abundantly clear. And yet they launched this dilating investigation into then candidate Trump. They continued it with President Trump. And so the president is rightly outraged, and I'm happy he's expressing it, that they essentially used a spy to infiltrate his campaign, to elicit and induce and entrap people into saying incriminating things. If it was done for purely political reasons, and it appears it was, that is a crime. It's called abuse of power, deprivation of rights under color of law. They were depriving candidate Trump of his constitutional rights, his right to privacy and Fourth Amendment rights.
Okay, and Tom Fitton, I'm going to go to you. You know, there's a lot of talk about an informant and a spy. What is the difference between an informant and a spy, if there is one at all?
There is no practical difference. It's gamesmanship on the part of the Obama administration, the top leadership, which this week was forced to admit they did have someone targeting the Trump campaign who was on the payroll of at least one agency. We don't know, maybe more than one agency, which would have been without precedent within, at least in modern American history. You'd have to go back to the 60s to find anything similar in terms of governmental abuse. And when you hear Clapper and Brennan and Comey and the rest complain and criticize President Trump for highlighting their corruption, you're looking at a list of people who have, in my view, significant criminal and civil liability over what went on their watch during the Obama administration and after. And you know, and when you hear Brennan go crazy and attack Trump like he is, you have to wonder why on earth why on earth was he ever allowed near any counterintelligence investigation related to Mr. Trump? He obviously hated him, and it explains why things went off the rails they did under the Obama administration.
And you know, Charlie, when Tom says they obviously hated Donald Trump, I don't think that it could be any clearer. You had a whole cabal at the top of the FBI and in the intelligence community there who hated Donald Trump. And yet a year ago when Devin Nunes, and when it appeared that, you know, there was something cooking here, and they thought that, you know, the president was wearing a tinfoil hat and Devin Nunes was off his rocker, you know, it's all coming to fruition.
Oh, it really is. I mean, remember, everybody thought that Devin Nunes was behaving bizarrely, and he was meeting with intelligence officials in various secure locations at the White House grounds, and all of the press was making fun of him. And what we're seeing today is that basically all of the concerns that he sort of hinted at back then, over a year ago, have come to fruition, and as Tom pointed out, even the Democrats are having to acknowledge that yes, indeed, they did insert a spy into the political campaign, and I think it is absolutely unprecedented. We've heard of hints of this kind of thing back during the 60s and 70s.
Right.
It was not, I would argue, it's not nearly as bad and as extensive as this, because among other things, these people are actually going, they were actually actively punishing people, their political opponents, which is shocking.
It is shocking, and the amazing part of it, Greg, is that, you've got look, the Republicans now are looking at some people whose names we've only heard of. Bill Priestap, he's a guy who was the assistant director of the FBI counterintelligence. He was Strzok's boss. He helped change the name from, gross negligence to extremely careless. Sure. And then you've got Michael Steinbeck and John Giacalone, or whatever his name is. These are people at the upper echelon of the FBI being called before Congress. Do you think they're going to take the fifth? Do you think they're going to tell us what happened?
So far, they've been obstructing. The Judiciary Committee has for a year been trying to question people, high-ranking officials of the FBI. And the FBI has been refusing. That is obstruction of Congress. It is a classic trope for people to claim that the FBI cannot talk about a pending investigation. That is true except for Congress, which has a constitutional duty and a right under a lawful subpoena to obtain this information and testimony. It's obstruction of Congress to fail to comply. And the president is right to demand, as chief executive of the executive branch, that the DOJ and the FBI comply with the law.
All right. And Tom Fitton, you know, I've given you a lot of credit in the past. You have done things that Congress hasn't been able to do. I mean, it's your determination and your perseverance in trying to get records under FOIA that has gotten things that Congress hasn't even been able to get. So, you know, right now, we've got the FBI and the Department of Justice, as Greg says, who they're stonewalling, slow walking, and saying they don't have records when, in fact, they do have records, and they have been lying. What does the president do at this point? He is the chief executive. The FBI and Justice Department are under him. What should he do to get this information out?
He should order a mandatory declassification review of the documents within a reasonable amount of time, and have his lawyers in the White House counsel's office or some outside experts that he trusts review these records on any withholdings they actually want to follow up on to make sure nothing's being withheld improperly. You know, we've got these FOIA cases out there now. I mean, we're waiting on the text messages. There's a process now in court for these various text messages. He could order the Justice Department and the FBI start complying with the transparency law. These agencies don't think they answer to the president, and they don't think they answer to Congress. And I think what they're doing here, Judge, is they're protecting the Mueller operation, which has its origins in all of this spying and FISA warrants, national security letters where they're taking up the phone records of the campaign, unmaskings, and the use of the Clinton DNC dossier. That's all part of Mueller's operation now. And that's why they're resisting Congress, because they know if that gets uncovered, so Mueller's operation ends.
You know, Tom, I have been very critical of the fact that the Republicans are not doing anything. I mean, I'm not being critical of those in Congress who are doing as much as they can. But it is time to get this thing rolling. It is time for consequences, accountability. That's why Donald Trump is president. And so, you know, I'll go to you, Charlie. I mean, what do you say to those people who say, oh, these are just more hearings to make the Democrats look bad or to force these people to testify to things they don't want to testify to and that are protected national security issues?
They're stalling is what they're doing. They're all stalling. And, you know, you look back at all the egregious things, I would say call them crimes, that were committed during the campaign and after the campaign. Why did they do it? The reason they did it with such abandon was because they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win the election and none of this would ever come to light. And it wouldn't matter.
We know that. So what do we do now?
And they're doing the same thing now. And they think that they're going to win control in November, and the Democrats will, and they can then go and cover all of it. I think that Tom Fitton's exactly right. The president should begin declassifying everything. They should blow everything out into and have an absolute showdown, because these people do work for the executive branch. They are answerable to the legislative branch.
Okay, and Greg, the final question to you. The significance of Strzok not testifying, is he cooperating?
No. If I were him, I'd cooperate. First of all, it's always important to tell the truth. And second of all, he can cut himself a deal because he's in serious legal jeopardy. But, you know, this is a classic cover-up that's taking place in Washington. They always claim the mantle of classified information, and then when it's later unredacted, we find out it was a lie.
And you know what the problem is, Greg, and I have to end here. We have an absent attorney general, and that is a loss to the American people and the president. Anyway, thank you, gentlemen. And coming up, President Trump doubles down on calling MS-13 gang members animals. Sebastian Gorka and Geraldo Rivera are next, as this special edition of Hannity, Trump on Offense, continues. Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity, Trump on Offense. Earlier this week, President Trump participated in a roundtable discussion on immigration and MS-13 gangs. The president called MS-13 a menace and more. Take a look.
Crippling loopholes in our laws have enabled MS-13 gang members and other criminals to infiltrate our communities. And Democrats in Congress refuse to close these loopholes, including the disgraceful practice known as catch and release. MS-13 gang members. I called them animals the other day, and I was met with rebuke. They said, they're people. They're not people. These are animals. And we have to be very, very tough.
And during an interview on Fox and Friends, the president explained why our laws need to be tougher against gangs like MS-13. Watch.
Everybody knows what's going on. These are vicious killers, and they shouldn't be allowed into the country. The laws are horrible. We're bringing them out by the thousands. As you know, we're setting records. This is a record that I don't even like talking about it because it's so ridiculous. They shouldn't be in the country. But we are doing, from the standpoint of law enforcement, a great job. The Democrats are sticking up for MS-13. You heard Nancy Pelosi the other day, like trying to find all sorts of reasons why they should be able to stay. These are stone-cold killers, vicious killers.
Joining us now is Fox News national security strategist and former deputy assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, and author of The Geraldo Show, Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. All right, gentlemen, I understand, Geraldo, that what the president said about MS-13 was in reaction to what someone had said before about those MS-13 gang members, and that's why he called them animals. Even you, a smart person like you, Geraldo, were caught off guard thinking that the president was talking about everyone as animals. Take it back.
Well, the president's remarks were released piecemeal by people who were criticizing the president for using those hot-button words like animal. And when I first read it, it was not in the context of MS-13. It was just, I thought he was talking about immigrants generally, and it was very disconcerting to me. And I complained about it. Then I heard from Sean Hannity and others and said, no, read the context of the entire remarks. I was not working that day. So I read the context of their remarks, and then I quickly amended my statement. I still think that when you use hot button words like savage or animal, you've got to be extremely careful that you're not demonizing an entire group. And I think that that's what the Democrats seized on. I think the president, in some cases, creates more problems for himself than it's worth. But I do believe that every effort should be used to crush MS-13. The president's absolutely right. They are a menace, just as the Bloods are a menace and the Crips are a menace. These other, just like the mafia was a menace and the Russian mob is a menace. They are horrible people. They have no right to be in the country. They want them behind bars or deported for sure. We just have to be careful not to paint with a broad brush, Judge.
You know, Dr. Gorka, when I was a judge, I sentenced someone. As I recall, I think it was a murder sentence, and I called the guy an animal. And I said he belonged in a cage, which is where I was sending him at the time, to prison, and I got a lot of heat for that. You know, I think that one of the reasons that people love President Trump and that he's elected is because he's a straight talker. If you take a baseball bat to a 16-year-old and a machete and cut somebody up, you are an animal. And the most frustrating part is that in, I believe it was 2014, when there was this big influx from Central America, they were coming in and they were saying, I am a Latin king, I'm MS-13, I got all my tats here, and we were letting them in. Should we have?
Look, I'm a little disappointed with Geraldo's, non-apology. Geraldo, you've met the president. How can you even posit for a millisecond that he thinks all immigrants are animals? He's married to an immigrant. It's absurd. The fact that he was taken out of context isn't an accident. The New York Times and CBS had headlines where they said he called undocumented immigrants animals. That's a lie. These people are animals. He talked about MS-13 gang members. This is an organization that its name comes from the violent initiation ritual that you have to go through to become one of their killers. So, yeah, Judge, it's amazing to have a president who finally talks the truth and has common sense, and that's why he connects with the American people who know these people are killers and animals.
Geraldo, should President Obama have let them in knowing who they were? And everybody knows that to be a member of MS-13, you need to kill somebody and generally rape someone in front of someone else and then kill her. Should the president have let them in?
I think that historically, Judge, we have to set the stage here. It wasn't
I don't
until
want to set the stage. I want to talk about Obama.
Wait a second.
No, I'm asking the questions.
I know, but I want to talk about MS-13. MS-13 was really identified as this menacing organization relatively recently in 2004 during the George W. Bush administration.
When I was a DA, I knew they were animals. In 2014, we all knew they were animals. Now President Obama lets them in and says you've got to let them in 2014.
All right. I think that the problem with inflammatory remarks like let me finish my sentence.
Go ahead.
The problem with inflammatory remarks like Dr. Gorka's attack on me just now is that it obscures the big issue.
What is the big issue?
We as lawyers and people who care about law and order, we want the federal, state, and local governments to use every tool in their possession to crush these criminal organizations. They are organized criminal organizations who have no place in American society.
Right.
We want them crushed. Immigrant or documented, undocumented.
No kidding. So what's your point?
Legal citizens, gangbangers have to be crushed. They have no place in American society.
Right.
My point is very simple. When you talk about MS-13, a tiny sliver of the 11 million odd undocumented immigrants, the danger is that you paint with a broad brush and it has a racist connotation.
And you know it.
It isn't baloney. It isn't baloney. You may not agree with me, but it is. Why do you think the Democrats had the opening to attack the president, taking him out of context?
Because they lie
Because
all
you've got to
the
be
time.
extremely careful.
No.
It's just like the Italian people complained so bitterly for so many decades how they were being painted by the broad brush of mafia. It was a stigma that weighed heavily on the Italian-American community. The MS-13, every respectable Latino in this country wants MS-13 eradicated.
Of course they do, and that's why we've got to be straight shooters, I have to say. But I want to finish this, Geraldo, and the truth is that the immigrants, legal immigrants, illegal immigrants, the chambermaid, the person who's waiting on you, the person who's calling you, they want them gone. So let's call them what they are. I don't care if somebody misinterprets it. It's about time we said this is right, this is wrong, this is this is legal, this is illegal.
I just want us to stop making everything about right, left, red, blue. This is something that everyone should stand united. Latinos come to this country, the vast majority, law-abiding, hardworking. They want to be part of the American dream. They don't want these to be, rapists and murderers.
Yep.
Every survey indicates the vast majority.
And they work hard, and they stay here, and nobody's looking to get rid of those people. It's the criminals and the animals of MS-13.
Then you and I are absolutely in sync, as we usually are.
Coming up, thank you, Geraldo. President Trump continues to call out obstructionist Democrats. We'll play you the tape and get reaction from Charlie Kirk, Doug Schoen, and Gina Loudon as this special edition of Hannity continues.
And live from America's News headquarters, I'm Jackie Ibanez in New York. The meeting between President Trump and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un might be back on. President Trump called off the planned meeting yesterday, but said on Twitter this evening, we are having very productive talks with North Korea about reinstating the summit, which, if it does happen, will likely remain in Singapore on the same date, June 12th, and if necessary, will be extended beyond that date. A Florida judge declaring that the state's law against smokable medical marijuana is unconstitutional. Current state law allows medical marijuana to only be consumed orally or by vaping. But a judge today said Floridians have the right to use marijuana however it's recommended by their physicians, including smoking in private places. Florida's Department of Health is appealing the judge's decision. I'm Jackie Ibanez. Now back to Hannity for all of your headlines. Log on to foxnews.com. Have a great evening.
Democrats like to campaign as moderates at election time. But when they go to Washington, they always vote for the radical Pelosi agenda down the line. Can you imagine having Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House. Can you imagine? We will need to elect more members of Congress who will protect life, support our military, secure our borders, and grow our economy and continue making America great again. But if Democrats gain power, they will try to reverse these incredible gains. These are historic gains. They will try and reverse many of them.
Welcome back to this special edition of Hannity. That was President Trump earlier this week warning Americans what will happen if Democrats win in this year's midterm elections. And the president continued his warning today, tweeting, quote, Democrats are so obviously rooting against us in our negotiations with North Korea, just like they are coming to the defense of MS-13 thugs, saying that they are individuals and must be nurtured, or asking to end your big tax cuts and raise your taxes instead. Dems have lost touch. But according to former Clinton pollster and Fox News contributor Doug Schoen, it's the Democrats that could be in trouble. He wrote an article earlier this week titled, quote, A civil war is looming for Democrats. Primary results Tuesday in 4 states explain why. Doug joins us now, but also with us is radio talk show host and member of President Trump's media advisory board, Jeanine Loudon, and Turning Point USA founder, Charlie Kirk. All right, Doug, let's start with you. Talk to me about your article.
Well, what I'm saying is you've got the progressives who very sadly reflect much of what Donald Trump was saying. Then you have moderates like me who believe, no, we don't coddle MS-13. They are animals and need to be called as such and need to be gotten out of here any way we can. Who we make it clear that we don't want Nancy Pelosi as Speaker like Connor Lamb in Pennsylvania. We want a pro-growth agenda. We don't want redistribution. We want compromise on health care, and we want compromise on immigration. Put simply, the Democrats can win the House as moderates. They can't win as so-called leftist progressives.
And what did the primary results this past Tuesday prove?
Well, they proved 2 things. First, a number of moderates who were outsiders did prevail. The week before, it was mostly progressives winning. So we're having a fight about message, and where the Democrats come down, Judge, is they come down just resisting Trump. To win, they need a positive, pro-growth, inclusive agenda.
Isn't that interesting? Wasn't that Hillary Clinton's problem? That's her name, Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, she had no message.
No message.
She couldn't. But there is a traditional Democratic message. I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat, and we did win with a balanced budget. We did do it with welfare reform, and those are the Democrats that I speak to and stand up for.
All right, Jeanine Loudon. You know, the left is unfortunately, is siding with MS-13, North Korea, rooting for North Korea, and saying, we're going to raise your taxes. I mean, can they possibly win?
You know, in my profession, going back years as somebody who does psychological analysis, I've seen derangement and people lose touch many times. But I can honestly tell you that in America and even in history, we rarely see an entire population of people so out of touch that, as you point to, Judge, that they would pick MS-13 members over American angel moms who've lost their children, or higher taxes over a thriving American economy, or, for crying out loud, nuclear war with North Korea over peace. It doesn't even make sense. And as you watch this whole Spygate thing go down, it begins to remind you a little bit of Gollum at the end of The Ring, when you're just watching this self-annihilation happen and you feel really bad because it's so grotesque. And you look at decent people out there who just disagree with you politically, like Doug, and it's hard to watch.
Well, I don't know. You don't disagree, do you? I mean, aren't you in agreement that tax cuts are good?
Yeah, I would have actually done more tax cuts for individuals, less for big business. But yes, we reduced the capital gains tax cut when I was working for Bill Clinton.
And MS-13, they're animals.